Alrighty. Welcome everybody. Welcome to no one's watching this, so who doesn't matter. Yeah, man. This is my not my first live stream. I've attempted to live stream a couple of times. Yeah, this is another live stream on my page. Very interested to see how this thing goes. Um, the weird part with these live streams is definitely talking into like the abyss, but no one watching, and you can see no one's watching. Like it shows me right here, zero people are watching this live stream. So I'm kind of talking, to nobody, but it's good practice. I was reading where it says that, when you live stream, you want to talk to, whether you're talking to one person or you're talking to 1,000 people, you want to have the same amount of energy. You want to have the same exact effort in your live streams. So it builds good practice. So that's what I'm doing. Today has been a very interesting day. This past couple of weeks have been, very interesting for me. And as you can see by the title of this live stream, I kind of wanted to start today's show talking about my anxiety, because this last go round of me dealing with really bad anxiety has been interesting. It's been, in many ways, more challenging than previously. As some of you might notice, some of you may not, that February 1st, 2024, I had a panic attack on my way to the mailroom at my job. I'm not going to tell you where I work. I fear I may have said something about where I worked before. Bad idea. I shouldn't do that. And I ended up, like, I was on my way to the. No, there's a stream we talked about it already, right? So panic attack on my way to the mailroom, and I thought I was dying. I thought, hey, this is it. I'm gonna die on my way to the mailroom. And luckily, of course, I didn't die. I would find out later on once I got taken to the emergency room, because they thought I might have been dying or having a heart attack. That what I was suffering from was a panic attack, not a heart attack. This would lead to me going through the internet and finding out that apparently many people mistake panic attacks for heart attacks. It's not just a me thing. I wasn't overly exaggerating or whatnot. And so I dealt with, in 2024, I dealt with pretty bad anxiety post the panic attack, right? Like, once the panic attack is over, some people, they're able to kind of just move on. Maybe not eventually, but after like a week, maybe 2 weeks, they're kind of back to their normal self. For me, that was not the case. I was kind of struggling with anxiety that entire year. At some points it got really bad. After the initial panic attack, I ended up going to the emergency room. Well, I went to urgent care. I was doing my walkthroughs at work, and I felt like a tightening around my leg one time, and freaked me out. Went to urgent care, and they, of course, they took me to the emergency room, so I went there. Yeah, so I made a trip, maybe two trips to the emergency room after my initial trip to the emergency room for the panic attack, and it was rough. It was rough. I recently found my first attempt at a journal that I tried to start, typing as a Word document at the behest of my therapist, Amy, and just kind of rereading what I was writing about the incident, and also rewatching. I rewatched my live stream that I did back when I was at my aunt's apartment, living solo. I think it was a week after my panic attack, and just kind of seeing my mannerisms, hearing me like retell the story. Yeah, man, it was tragic for me. It was very tragic for me. And I think I've dealt with anxiety for some time before then, right? Like, I don't think that was my first time, or I don't think the panic attack was the beginning of my anxiety. I think that's ridiculous. Um, yeah, I was dealing with anxiety. If I had to think back, and I've always been maybe a more anxious person than other people. Like, I've always kind of, but you think that's just like regular shyness, and in many ways it is, right? Because even though I'm going through this mental health situation now, I still think for the most part, we overdiagnose people and we take experiences and feelings that are totally natural, like feeling anxious or feeling nervous or shy. These are natural feelings. And I think sometimes we kind of medicalize certain things that we shouldn't medicalize because these things are actually normal and, totally fine. And so for me, for example, growing up, I was very, very shy when it came to kind of making friends or introducing myself to new people. I was especially shy, talking to girls. I still get nervous talking to women. Right. But then kind of things kind of took a spike up when I got jumped one day walking through the park from work. Uh, you know, Now again, I was able to kind of continue to live my life with a certain degree of normalcy where I would still go to church, I would still go to work, nothing like that was impacted for me. But I wouldn't travel when the sun was down, right? Like me getting jumped on my way home from work had made me so anxious that I just refused to um, travel that night. Like I would schedule my entire life around making sure I did not have to travel at nighttime. And that went on for weeks. That don't went on for months. I remember my dad. I think he kind of realized that I was kind of going through a situation or dealing with something because I remember him telling me, "Hey, let's go ahead and take a walk, after dark." And I was so terrified. I was so afraid to go out after, when the sun was down. And me and him kind of walked outside together. And then after that, I would start to like go out a little bit later. But for like a good year, maybe 2 years, like walking, sun was down, I was inside, or I I took the bus as close to my apartment as humanly possible. Right, like before then, I might get off the train and walk, 10 to 15 minutes home. No, I just wouldn't do it. I would purposely plan so I spent the least amount of time physically walking outside as humanly possible. I never dealt with it. I kind of just, like you'll live with these things so long and you'll exist in the realm of a constant state of being anxious. It becomes your new baseline, your new normal, right? Like I don't remember what it feels like to not be nervous. I don't, remember what it feels like to not be anxious or at all the time. Um, like calm. I'm mostly calm when I'm home, but even when I'm home, I'm not like as calm as I used to be. Right? Like again, it's like I have tinnitus, right? And I don't have the super bad tinnitus that some people have, where it's this loud ringing in their ear all the time that they can't like not notice. My tinnitus, for the most part, I don't really notice it unless it's really really quiet, or it'll flare up out of nowhere every now and then. But for the most part, it's kind of in the background. But if you put me like in a room or in a quiet space, that's when I really notice my tinnitus. I don't know what silence sounds like anymore. And I won't know what silence sounds like until I'm ever again. Right? Like once you have tinnitus, you kind of have it. It is what it is. You just live with it. You try to make sure it doesn't get worse, things of that nature, but you have what you have. So that's how it is with my anxiety. Right? Like, as of right now, I don't remember what it's like to not be anxious. Now, I can make my anxiety a lot worse, and I can make it not as bad, but at least on my own, I have yet to get to the point where hey, I'm not anxious. So it is what it is. This is kind of how I'm existing in the world, how I'm living. You know, it is what it is. Um, Now, this latest go around of the anxiety was driven by the fact that um, this was a couple of weeks ago, May 13th, I think it was May 13th or May 14th. I think it was May 13th. Yes, May 13th. It was a Tuesday, and I'm on my way to work. No, actually, let's go back to May 11th, Mother's Day. I think right, May 11th was Mother's Day. Let me check. Yep. So May 11th, Mother's Day. I'm at church. and we'll get into me leaving my church, a little bit later in the live stream. I'm at church. I'm on the organ. I'm playing. Everything is kind of doing what it's doing. Doing my thing, and we get to like around maybe tithes and offering, right? And for those of you that don't go to church or don't go to a Baptist church, tithes and offering, that's like a midpoint of the service, kind of where everyone gets up and they walk around and they put their money in the basket, and the musicians are playing music so people can walk down and do their thing. And so I'm on the organ and I'm playing, and I'm starting to feel like it is very difficult for me to breathe. Like playing the organ, doing my thing, I'll try some organ music, playing it, and like I'm sitting there like, okay, it's getting hard for me to breathe. I'm trying to do my breathing things, breathe in, through your nostrils 4 times, breathe out slowly, but I have to play, so I can't stop playing. I'm playing. I'm the people are going around doing tithes and offering. I'm breathing, but I'm starting to panic. I'm like, oh shit, I can't breathe. Right? I can't breathe. Tithes and offering fit. There was a brief moment, like maybe 2, 3, 4 seconds, where I like hiccup a little bit and stop playing to try to catch my breath and start again. Like I felt like I was about to, have a full blown, oh my God, I can't breathe, get the ambulance. But I made it through tithes and offering, and after tithes and offering, they do announcements and whatever, and so there's the pre-sermonic selection, right? Now by this point, I'm really struggling, right? Like I remember leaning back, like hunching up, leaning back, and playing like this almost. Because it was the only position that I found that I could breathe and I didn't feel like I was gonna pass out. And I still haven't looked at that. I have not looked at the video from that service. The church that I used to play for. They record their services, and I can see myself on the organ. I have yet to go back to that service just because I don't want that in my mind. But I remember saying, "Yo, what the hell is going on?" And again, eventually, I made it through service, but that was in the back of my mind, like, wow, like, okay, that snuck up on me while I was just playing the organ. So that was May 11th, Mother's Day. So Tuesday, which was May 13th, right? Yes, May 13th. I'm on my way to work, and I'm riding the train, and I'm sitting down. I have my umbrella at the time, and I'm just sitting there on the train like I do every morning. And again, I kind of live in like a constant state of feeling like I'm not getting enough air sometimes, but it's manageable where I can go to work. I can, like I don't have those problems where I can't kind of, go to work, whatever, or whatever, or it's so bad that I feel like, oh my God, I'm about to pass out 24/7. It's not that bad 24/7, but I'm on the train going to work and, sitting down, and I feel like this, it's difficult for me to breathe. So I'm like, repositioning myself, leaning forward. And I don't know why. I just have this habit where I lean forward trying to breathe. I know now that people who have breathing problems, it's called the tripod position. You feel like it's easier for you to breathe when you're kind of, leaning a little bit and your diaphragm has more room to expand. Right? Get off the train. I'm still not feeling that great. I get on the bus on my way to work, and I'm still not feeling great. And so by the time I get to work, I go immediately to my office, and I'm like, I tell my supervisor, hey, I'm checking myself in to urgent care. I'm having trouble breathing, right? And he, of course, he was so cool and kind. He walked me to the emergency room. I work near the hospital. Look at God, right? Hey, Nala. Right, so get into the emergency room. I explain what's going on. They run a couple of tests. They do x-rays of my lungs and whatnot, and, yada, yada, yada. And I was in there for like a good 4 or 5 hours, by the way. Once they realize that you ain't dying, you're not having a heart attack, you can expect to be in the emergency room for a long ass time. But they did X-rays on my lungs, and they did an EKG on my heart. They did an echo on my heart, and they're saying like, you know what? We don't really kind of see, your lungs look fine. We don't see anything really that's wrong. The echo doesn't show any inflammation around your heart, but some of what you're describing as far as feeling relief when you kind of lean forward to breathe, it is kind of we see people who have inflammation around the heart, they describe feeling relief kind of like you are. So just in case, we're going to subscribe you with 600 milligrams of ibuprofen for you to take for inflammation. Again, we don't see anything, but as like a precaution, as a just in case, here you go. Boom. Cool. So I get home, I take the medication. They give me a note saying, hey, go home for the day, take the next day off. So I go home that day. I take Wednesday off. I'm at home taking the medication, and I go to work on Thursday. I work an entire shift on Thursday, right? Like a normal person. On Fridays, I open up. So I go to open on Friday. Here's where things get a little bit, rough, right? Friday, I'm walking to the train, and I'm noticing that in my left eye, it's a little bit blurry. Right? Like when you wake up in the morning and sometimes like, your vision's a little bit blurry. So like you blink a little bit, or you rub your eye, and then you're fine. Right? It was like that, except no matter how much I rub my eye or blunt, or did some blinking, it was still blurry. Right? Get to work, open up. My plan was to wait until after work to kind of go to the emergency room. Around 8 o'clock, I called the emergency department. I'm like, hey, I was just there Tuesday, and they gave me 600 milligrams of ibuprofen, and I'm noticing that I have blurry vision in my left eye. Is this like a side effect of the medicine? Should I be worried? Right? I'm thinking worst case scenario, they'll tell me, hey, you know what? We don't really think that you know what? Yeah, it's like a side effect. You can stop taking the medication for now. Maybe go down to a lower dosage. Right? I'm thinking it's not going to be a big deal. The person I spoke to, she said, no, this is not a side effect of, ibuprofen, 600 milligrams. You should come to the emergency room right now, right? Well, as soon as you can. So I get to my desk. I'll wait a little bit till like 8:30. I'm like, it can't be this dire. Maybe she's just been extreme. And I kind of, did some, put something to Chat GPT, say, hey, I have these symptoms. Should I go? And he's like, yeah, you should go to the emergency room immediately, right? So told my manager, hey, I got to go. I go to the emergency room. I'm so parched. Go to the emergency room, and I get there at the desk. We do like a basic exam, real quick. With she has this eye, like the letters you read when you go to the eye doctor for like glasses. Because she had that on this little chart or this iPad, and she had me cover my eyes and read something. And I'm reading everything, and she's like, "Cool, you know what? Call it. Call stroke." And I'm like, excuse me, right? Immediately, a bunch of people come running out. I'm like, okay, they sit me down, they take my blood pressure. My blood pressure was like 191 over something, right? Now, later on, it will drop down to like 140 something. They took me from the main area. They took me to get there was a CAT scan on my brain or something like that, or an MRI on my brain. It was a lot, right? I was freaking out. I don't like being in those machines. Yeah, and it was MRI because they put fluid in me too. Like, they strapped me down, like strap my head down, strap my chest down. You're in that thing. You go back, and it's this machine. Like, you hear the noise. It's the most terrifying. If you're claustrophobic, when you go into an MRI machine, absolute terror, right? Eventually, I get out. Newsflash, I didn't have a stroke, right? Which, again, I did not believe I had a stroke, though nurses and doctors, when they behave in a certain way, they can absolutely talk you into believing kind of the worst parts of yourself. Like, oh no, he had a stroke, right? I had a stroke. So, but I was fine. It would turn out, an optometrist came to see me. He suspects that my CPAP machine was leaking and it caused my eye to dry out. which is why when I woke up, I had the blurry vision. And so, he prescribed me, some artificial tears. I use that every night before I go to bed. I put the tears into my eyes, and for the most part, I've been fine since. So there's that thing, but it freaked me out. And so Saturday, I woke up and I started feeling, I don't know if it was heart palpitations, because it didn't feel like heart palpitations. I've had heart palpitations before. This didn't feel like heart palpitations. What I ended up having was kind of like the feeling of kind of like a muscle twitch or a spasm, like, inside of my body, one of my organs or whatever. And it freaked me out. And so I told, we usually had choir rehearsal at the time, and I kind of text everybody, say, hey, just let you know, I'm not coming to rehearsal, and I'm not coming to church tomorrow. So do what you will, try to get through this rehearsal, and I'm so sorry. I'll try to make the next one. And, that entire morning, I felt horrible. Absolutely horrible. It wasn't until a couple of days ago that I realized that the twitchy feeling that I had inside is gone. I don't feel that way anymore. Whether it was heart palpitations that I felt on a different part of my body, which again, I still doubt that was the case. I think it was kind of like some type of muscle spasm somewhere inside, or an organ spasming, and it's kind of subsided, as I've kind of, been, working out a little bit, make sure I'm hydrated more. Right. But I didn't go to church. Did not go to church. I don't miss Sundays as a musician. As a church musician, I am always at church as, like I'm there, as a dedicated musician. Hey, this is what I do. People are counting on me. I don't miss church. That's not me. I don't miss church. Right. That's how bad I was feeling. Monday I had work, but before work, I had an appointment with an optometrist. And so at like 10:15 in the morning. So get up, get ready. I go to work. And no, go to the optometrist. Get to the optometrist's office. I check in, and she's like, "Hey, well, you know what? It might be a little bit of a wait time, but just wait here in the waiting room." So I sit down in the waiting room, right? And I'm sitting there, and first of all, it is packed in this waiting room. I mean, this one lady, she had like 4 or 5 children with her. All children like being, rowdy and like rumbly, all of that stuff. So I'm sitting there, right? I made it maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And then I was like, I can't take this no more. I get up, I go to the front desk person. I say, hey, I have an emergency. I kind of can't be here right now. And I run out, right? Run out the office, and I run to like Central Park. My job is right by Central Park. And I called my father on the phone, and I just had like a complete mental breakdown. Like telling him, I'm tired of this. I feel horrible. I'm so anxious. I'm afraid. Like I could feel the anxiety in my body like, all the time. Like the fear in my body, all the time. Like it's not like me being afraid of things. It's like the physical sensations that I have. The constant short of breath, the like this like this butterfly feeling at all times right here in my chest. My stomach. And I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. Like I'm done. Like no more. I don't want to, continue going on. I don't want to continue living really. Right. That's how I felt. That's what I told my pops. And I look like a crazy person too. I got so mad eventually I got hung up the phone and I kind of ran down, into the Central Park until I got to like a bench where I could just like, sit there and just like decompress, let the sun fall on me and me take it easy for a little bit. He called me back and he was like, hey, just come home and let's talk about it and let's try to work through this, and I eventually did go home, of course, where he kind of talked me into, hey, maybe it's time that you actually, take your mental health serious and you go see a psychiatrist. Right. And I did. Right. And they started me on Lexapro, which is a anxiety medication. It's a SSRI. I take it once a day in the morning. I take it with breakfast because I read somewhere that some people take Lexapro and they feel nauseous. So I take it with medication all the time. My Lexapro. And I've been on Lexapro now for like a week, some change. Taking the medication. I'm supposed to meet with my psychiatrist again at the end of the month. Sorry, not the end of the month. In like the next 2 weeks, I'm supposed to meet with him again. And I say all this to say, I haven't worked for like the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's scary not working because again, bills don't stop needing to be paid. I still have bills. Now, I happened to luck up where I was in a pretty good position. And I pay my rent already, so my rent's already paid, and I have enough money, I think, to kind of get me through, the next 2 weeks when I'm still off of work and I'm not making any money. But I do think this break was needed for me to kind of recalibrate and to kind of take ownership over my mental health. The truth of the matter is I haven't taken my health seriously, physical and mental health, for quite some time. Right? Like, should have taken my mental health seriously after I got jumped going through the park. Didn't do it. Should have taken my mental health seriously when I gained all of this weight. I'm 300 pounds now. I'm 6'1". I don't got no muscles. It's all fat. All here. You can't see it, but it's all, you can see the man titties, right? You can see the man boobs, but the fat, the gut that I have, yeah. I should have got mental health when I put on all of that weight after my back injury, which sent me into like a deep depression, right? Didn't do it, right? So, my situation is 100% self-inflicted. So this is not like a woe is me. Of course, you feel that way sometimes because you wonder like why, this had to be your problem, right? But everyone has their problem, right? And for me, I've been trying my best to kind of navigate and get myself past this into like a healthier position. And this month off has kind of been, what I think I've needed to kind of set myself back on close to like a right path. If that makes sense. I don't have to worry about the side effects of the medication being off of work, which I would have been worried about if I had to go to work, taking this medication. And trust me, it has had some side effects, right? Like, there's been days where I've gotten home or, even if I didn't go out, where I'm just like sitting on the couch at like 2:00 in the afternoon. And I just remember waking up like 2 or 3 hours later, right? Like, because, drowsiness is one of the side effects early on. Right. So I don't have to worry about that. Right. It's giving me time to build good patterns of behavior as well. I'm cooking a lot more. Part of the reason why I gained so much weight, one of the reasons is I'm an emotional eater, and I'm especially a depressed eater, right? Where I get sad, or I get depressed, I just start stuffing my face. Just start eating, just start stuffing my face. Fried, unhealthy, snacks, chips, cakes, whatever you could think of that's unhealthy that you shouldn't be eating. I eat that stuff when I'm depressed, right? And I'm depressed in part because of life, but in part because I'm fat now. Fat, titties, I don't look that good naked. And so if when you don't look that good naked, like I don't, and I have a big ass mirror in my bathroom, right? So I'm forced to see my fatness every morning, right? Every morning when I'm awake, I see my fatness. I get up, I go to the bathroom, I take off my clothes to get in the shower, and I'm forced to look at my body as I step into the shower naked. And I don't like it, which makes me more depressed, right? So, and I'm stuck in this loop, right? I'm fat, so I eat, so I get depressed. I'm depressed, so I eat. The eat makes me fat, which makes me depressed, and round and round and round the cycle goes. And that's how I've been for quite some time, right? So being home, I'm learning to cook now. I cook enough for me to make my immediate meal, and a little bit left over for me to make some lunch for the following day as well. Which once I start working again, I'm gonna kind of need to keep that up instead of lunchtime. Hey, let me take my behind and go down to like the food trucks and eat some stuff, right? I've also been riding a stationary bike for I think 2 weeks and some change now, Monday through Friday. make sure I get on it, every weekday. Ride it for like around 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. Keep the heart rate between 95 beats per minute and 145. It recommended for me to stay in that range, given my weight. And it's been good. I feel good. I feel, when I'm riding the bike, I feel like I have no real problems. It's so strange that way. I feel like I have not a problem in the world. And not a single thing for me to worry about, for me to be concerned about. It feels good. And so, and I read also that in 4 to 8 weeks that, cardio like that, it reduces anxiety by like 30%. In fact, people who use cardio and CBT, it has kind of the same impact as medication for anxiety as well. So, I haven't started the CBT yet, but I'm hoping that, as I, continue riding the bike, maybe the Lexapro medication kicks in. And then if I can learn some of the cognitive behavioral techniques to kind of retrain my mind, I can kind of get off the medication and be a much more healthier person. And then like long term, I think if I just drop the excess weight, the excess fat that I have, I'll feel lighter, I'll feel better. I feel better about the way that I look, my self-image. There's no downside as far from what I can see, from this kind of path that I'm walking down. And so that's kind of been my, what I've been doing for the past couple of weeks as far as being unemployed. I'm taking as much advantage of it as I can, right? Going to the doctor, taking care of the other things, right? One of the things that when you have physical symptoms of anxiety that they recommend is, hey, go to the actual doctors and make sure it's not something physical, right? So I've been to the cardiologist, done the echo, knocked that out, right? Went to a pulmonologist on Monday, right? Today I did the pulmonary test that sitting down and having them, do the exam and everything, right? I get my results in a week, and so I'll find out from there. Okay, you were able to kind of, X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 right? And so I might knock that down as well. Right. So, just making sure, I get blood work on Friday, testing for, thyroid and, hormonal stuff and, some vitamin, make sure I'm not deficient in certain things. All of these things impact, levels of anxiety, levels of stress. And so I'm doing all of this stuff, knock that out of the park. And if I'm able to kind of exclude these things, all I'm really left with now is, okay, anxiety, right? And so it'll help me feel safe, feel good when I kind of clear all of these physical hurdles, these physical things. And I feel much more comfortable saying, hey, when I feel these physical symptoms, I know it's nothing physically wrong with me because I've been to these doctors, these specialists. I've had the test, the echo, right? And doctors are one thing, tests are better. I trust tests more than I trust doctors, being just quite honest with you. No disrespect to the doctors out there. It just, a test is for the most part, it's kind of this is the test. He passed the test or he failed the test. This is an echo. We see his heart, right? I trust that more than I trust doctors. Some of y'all, just, being honest, you're not really, not really that good. It is what it is. Don't shoot the messenger. So yeah, right. All in all, here to say that I'm hoping that this is kind of the beginning of me becoming who I used to be. I used to be a funny dude, man. I used to be a funny dude. Used to have a lot of energy to do certain things and have a lot of ideas, and anxiety kind of just robbed me of the joy, the happiness, right? It makes you not want to leave the house, at least for me. Not want to leave the house, not want to really do anything, not want to invite people to your house. You don't want to hang out with your friends. You don't want to go out because you don't know how you'll respond to things. And, it sucks. It sucks. It sucks. So again, I'm hoping that I'm on the proper path to healing, to, taking care of myself, to, all that good stuff. Right. Which leads me into leaving my church. Right. This past Sunday, it was my last Sunday at the church that I was playing for. It was a very emotional day for me. It was a very emotional day for the church as well. I've been there for 5 years, I think, 6 years maybe. I think 5 years. I've been playing at Mount Bethel. Right. Of course, COVID, but been there a good amount of time. Been there with various singers, people who used to sing with us, people who no longer sing with us, right? And leaving was it was a decision I made because I didn't feel like, well, I didn't trust myself to continue with my responsibilities given my physical and my mental state, right? Like, I was the person that was in charge of coming up with the songs, and then I was in charge of running the rehearsals, right? And and so I had to learn the songs myself as a musician, and then I had to learn the parts to give to the different sections. And then at rehearsals, I'm running the rehearsal, right? Sunday morning comes, I'm getting the mics together and dealing with the levels, and so um, it was a lot. It was a lot, and I didn't feel like I could really keep up with my responsibilities. And so, I had to leave, right? And, I was a paid musician. And, I got paid, pretty decent, for what I was doing, right? So, I don't want it to seem like I was being run into the ground, for no reason. I got compensated, but when I kind of put the two things on the scale, my compensation and my mental and physical health, I kind of realized that one of these things had to give, and I had to give up my role as a musician, in order for me to get myself right physically and mentally, and also to work a full-time job. Like, I'm working a full-time job for the first time, the past year and change, and it is a lot more, time consuming than, when I was working part-time. When I was working part-time, I made my own schedule where Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday I work 12 to 8. Beautiful shifts, right? Midday, you avoid all people on public transportation. Right? At 8 o'clock, when you get off, you avoid most of the rush on your way back home from work. It's beautiful. Time wise, my cat knocked over my water bottle. Um, had Monday off and Friday off. So, Sunday when I was at church, and let's say we had a long Sunday, right? We want to have an afternoon service, right? Service it finished. I knew, oh yeah, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. I get to relax, stay up, enjoy the rest of my Sunday night, enjoy my Monday, and then go to work. And same thing having Friday off. I knew I had the day off before Saturday, before I had to go to rehearsal, right? And so Saturday and Sunday, were work days for me, where for people who don't go to church, they had those days actually off where they can, relax or do things or whatever. I didn't. And so working a full-time job now, I wonder if having my Saturday and having my Sunday will, put me in a position where I feel better about work, because I actually have 2 days to really recharge, 2 days to really kind of, collect myself, recover, prepare. And as long as I was there as a musician, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? And so where would I find the time to work on my mental health and work on my physical health and to cook, meals, and to, sit back and relax and to kind of, enjoy certain things, working a full-time job? And it would be different if I was just a church goer, because again, if you're just going to church, you have Saturday off, right? But if you're like me and you're in charge of all of the groups, all of the choirs, I have one Saturday to myself, which was the second Saturday. But first Saturday I have rehearsal, third Saturday I have rehearsal, fourth Saturday I have rehearsal, right? So there was no time for me. And so, it was a sad decision, but I think it was the right one, in the long term, for me leaving the church, to focus on my mental and my physical health. But if I'm being honest, that was half or maybe a part of the reason. There was still other parts of why I left, as a musician, that were a little bit different. And it didn't necessarily have to do with anxiety or mental health, right? There were other things at play things that I kind of kept to myself, which was also, I'm kind of struggling right now with some belief stuff as well. And right, like, raised Baptist all my life, been in the church as long as I can remember, been in the church choir, was allowed to leave the church briefly. I forgot how old I was, but eventually my parents said, hey, you're at the age now, we're not going to force you to go to church. And, I stayed home for a couple of weeks. It felt great having Sundays to myself. It felt great. Just stay home, sleep late. Like, I enjoyed it a lot. Eventually, my aunt called because her church didn't have a musician, and they asked if I could play. And I was like, well, cool. And I got to the church, started playing a motif Yamaha. And, didn't really know all of the hymns, didn't really know how to do a lot of the things, on the keyboard. I think maybe a year into it, eventually I kind of graduated to the organ. And then I became a church musician. And I stayed at my aunt's church for maybe 2-3 years, maybe 4 years, until I eventually left, and I ended up at the church that I used to be at, for the past 5 years, I think. And so, like, this is my first time being kind of outside of church since I was maybe 17 or 18 years old. Yeah. So like a decade and 2 years, or 12 years, 13 years. And, the past couple of years, I've been dealing with like faith issues and struggling with belief, struggling with, God and the concept of God. And, and it's good that later on we're talking about Jordan Peterson, because I feel like me and him might have more in common than I would like to admit. But, like this year, I challenged myself to actually read the entire Bible, right? Which, again, that sounds crazy for me to be a Christian all my life, but to not have ever read the entire Bible. But newsflash, that's actually not as unusual as you may think. A lot of people who are Christians, or a lot of people who go to church, they don't read the Bible, or they don't read, or they have not read large portion of the Bible. They might read the Gospels a little bit. Maybe they'll read Paul's letters. A lot of people might read, Genesis and, Exodus, the story of Moses. But most people have not read the entire Bible. They haven't read First and Second Kings. They haven't read, Peter. They haven't read, the book of John. They haven't read, First and Second Chronicles. They haven't read, the book of Enoch. They haven't read Ruth. They haven't read their Bible. And so I said to myself, hey, if I'm having these questions about God and, and doubts about my faith, I have to at least, I owe it to myself to actually read this damn thing. So I think I started last year to read the Bible front to back, all the books, right? And I did a pretty good job, because normally I get to Leviticus and I just fall off. I'm like, this is a lot, right? And I'm trying to see if I could find the exact books that I skipped. Hold on, because I know if I get this, let's go to share screen. Okay, allow Bible Gateway share. Okay, all right, cool. Look, so this is Bible Gateway, right? I'm gonna go to the books that I read. So Genesis, I read all of this straight up until Isaiah. When I got to Isaiah, I kind of started to get confused. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I really wanted to get to the New Testament, so I kind of skipped. I still have this chunk left to read of the Old Testament, but I skipped to the New Testament and I read every book in the New Testament, right? So I have that portion of the Bible left, for me to read, right? And reading the Bible, I fell in love with kind of the story within the story, or like the meaning and like the truth, like, the way Jordan Peterson talks about the Bible. And I get why it frustrates people that Jordan Peterson doesn't give straight answers to, does he believe in God and whatever. And again, I have problems with that as well. But when when he discusses the Bible and kind of gets into like, the psychological meanings of certain things and, what the story is really trying to tell us, that's kind of how I fell in love with the Old Testament, right? Like, all of the stories about David's life and, David, right? Like you hear about David and, Bathsheba, David and Goliath. Dude, David was on the run from, I think it was King Saul for like most of his youth. I mean, like he had this dude trying to kill him, right? David was also a horrible father, right? One of his sons raped his daughter. And sorry, whoops, I shouldn't have said that word. One of his sons, assaulted his daughter, and his other son wanted to avenge his daughter, his sister's honor, and kill the other son, right? Different mom, so you know how that goes. Right? Like, I mean, just all of this, Job, right? Like, the stories within the Bible are so rich and so, like, you learn a lot about human nature by reading these stories. And then the New Testament, right? The story of Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount, and hearing how he relates to his disciples, right? Then you get Paul, and Paul, having this belief that's so strong that he's out there getting beaten and everything like that. Right? You have Peter, and you have the Book of Acts, which goes through the disciples, as they're out there, going through their ministry and everything, right? So it's an incredible book that I'm reading. But then there are parts of that as you're reading when you're like, this don't make no sense in certain respects. And there's no way for you to go and really have these conversations saying, hey, I don't think this makes that much sense. Right? Like, you find out that the flood story shares like 70% of the elements in like the flood story is taken from the what's the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? Like, hold on. Epic of Gilgamesh. Like, hold on, let me find this. Epic of Gilgamesh. Epic. When your browser is lost connection to your screen share audio. There's no audio for me to share, so. Epic of Gilgamesh. All right. And versus Noah. All right, look at this. The story of Noah may be part of the Abrahamic canon, but the legend of the Great Flood almost certainly has pre-biblical origins, rooted in the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. The Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh dates back nearly 5,000 years and is thought to be perhaps the oldest written tale on the planet, right? And I remember like Googling this amongst, like, if you go, I asked ChatGPT, like, hey, how similar is the, Epic of Gilgamesh to, like the flood story? And and it said like, yeah, like 70% of the elements are the same. Like details, main narratives and plots, like it's the same. Okay, so if it's the same, but one story is significantly older than the other one, it means the Bible got this from another story, which means the story in the Bible is not true, or it's not true in the way that it is being presented as true. And that bothered me, right? And I started, I signed up for this dude. His name is Bart Ehrman, right? He's like a biblical scholar, New Testament, knows this stuff. And he has this online class that I signed up for, right? Paid for it because I'm like, I got to learn more. And you study and you realize, oh, yo, a lot of the stuff here is believed by biblical scholars, both atheist and Christian scholars, to be exaggerations, to be historically inaccurate, and I can go on and on and on. And I'm not someone that I can hear these things and it doesn't bother me, right? So as I'm finishing up reading the New Testament, I'm having to deal with the reality of, hey, these stories in this Bible that you've been, told is the word of God, they have some errors, some mistakes. And then there are parts of the Bible that you read that, it just it's like, wait a minute, this is like a good thing that I'm reading about, like the genocide that you read about, where the Israelites will go and like storm a village or a people and leave nobody alive. Like they kill everybody, women, children. There's you know what? I'm gonna find this too because this bothers me a lot. Let me go to my chat GPT. There's a story in the Bible, and I apologize for moving my webcam. It's attached to my laptop. I don't got that fancy setup that a lot of these streamers have. There's a story in the Bible where the Israelites were married to non-Israelite women, and one of the prophets. I'm gonna find this. Okay, hold on. Here we are. Let me share my screen. Okay, share this tab instead. All right. And okay, cool. Bear. I named this, by the way. Whoop. Woo. This got my real name. Can't do that. All right. Let me go to I'm gonna share it once I kind of type this in. Which part of the Bible? Sorry for my screen moving. I'm typing. As the story where the prophet instructs the Israelites to leave their non-Jewish wives. All right, Ezra 9 and 10. Let's go to there, right? Because I want you to see what I'm talking about. Where you were. All right, Ezra. I'm going to pick an easy one. Let's go to the English Standard Version. Because, I don't want to. All right. Now I'm going to share my screen. All right. Here we go. Okay, so if you look here, let's go on to verse 10, right? Read the whole thing on your own time, right? And now, oh God, I got let's go to 10. Okay, here we go. I'm trying to find. Let's go here. I'm sorry about that. I should have had this prepared. Okay, so all right, now then make confession to the Lord, the God of your fathers, and do his will. Separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from the foreign wives. Right? So basically, the Israelites, they were married to these women who were not Israelites, right? Foreign women. And, because they wanted to get back in lockstep with God, Ezra, who's a prophet, he instructs them, hey, you should go ahead and we need to get right, leave those foreign women and let's get right back on track. And so these dudes who were married to these foreign women, they just abandoned them. They just abandoned them. Do you know what happened to women, to those women who were foreigners married to these Israelites men who just walked out on them? Just walked out. Women at this point in history cannot survive, right? like what you think their native men were going to raise some bastard kids that you had with some Israelite dude? Of course they weren't going to do that. And so you read that and you're like, whoa, right? Or you'll read the stuff about, okay, let's go back here. Right? Hold on. Give me the Bible verses where Israelites are instructed to commit genocide. Oh, several verses. Cool. Let's go to this one here. Deuteronomy 7th chapter, the 1st to the 2nd. NIV version. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show no mercy. No mercy. Let's keep going. Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, verse 16 through 18. However, in the cities of the nations the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes. Completely destroy them. The Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. Let's go to 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter, the 2nd to the 3rd verse. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belong to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Joshua, the 6th chapter, 21st verse. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle and donkeys. Then we have Numbers, the 31st chapter, the 1st to the 18th verse. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. So now we have some sexual slavery in here as well, right? And of course, it gives this thing about the context, their divine judgments, and the goal was to prevent Israel from being led astray. But, and again, I get it, hyperbolic war rhetoric, typical of ancient Near Eastern literature. I got you. But again, I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, whoa. So I have the parts of the Bible that, I don't think are historically true or are accurate. Like, the flood story. I have the parts like this where I'm like, this is horrific stuff that I'm reading about. And this is preached about, by pastors all the time. I'm not going to pretend like I haven't heard a pastor preach about this stuff in the past. I have heard those things. I think historically speaking, we kind of, when you're a Christian and you're going to church, you always put yourself in the position of the Israelites, which is ironic because, again, as an African American, I'm not a Jew. I'm not an Israelite, right? Like, I'm not. Even though the Hebrew Israelites would have something else to say about that, right? So we put ourselves in the position of the Israelites when we are reading the Bible and we're, in church and, we're listening to the pastor get into a sermon And, you can turn these things into like, yes, God is the war general, and he helped them, defeat armies that were like 3-4 times their sizes. And, we hear those things, and we hear about, like this is genocide. Like, this is actual genocide. Leave no women alive, no children, children alive. Take the wives who haven't slept with men for yourselves, which again is sexual slavery. Like, it's not like those women, would have been enthusiastic to marry the men who killed all of their fathers and their grandfathers and their brothers and their sons, etc., etc. Like, again, we don't really, because of how these stories are given to us and how they're preached to us and how we read them, we put ourselves into the position of the Israelites, right? But you would have to imagine, even if the other people, right? Here's where my mind goes, and I'm starting to ramble, which maybe streaming is not good for rambling, but I just have to kind of get this out, right? Fuck. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Yeah. Yeah, I'm rambling, but this is, if you can't ramble on stream, I don't know what you can do. Damn it, now I forgot my thought because of that camera mess up. And I can't rewind here. I wish I could. Look, man, all I'm gonna say is you read these stories, you hear these sermons about the Israelites and everything. We put ourselves in their shoes. But you would have to imagine, I remember now, right? When God is instructing the Israelites to kill everybody and leave no one alive and take their daughters for yourselves and whatever, right? You would have to imagine everyone in the village isn't like guilty of something. And they were guilty of worshiping gods that weren't Yahweh, right? Like, one thing you have to understand about the Bible is the Bible, even though it is not consistent at times, but it is written about a group of people and their God amongst many groups of people and their gods, right? And so the mortal sin that was committed here was these other individuals were not worshiping Yahweh, right? And they were behaving in a way, and they were acting in a way that were, that were despicable, deplorable, etc., etc. Cool, got you. You would imagine, you could say that the women have got to go too, right? I'm not a sexist. Women out there doing wild stuff, hey, you got to go too. The babies, the infants, why do they have to die, right? Like, think about how much Christians today, right, the religious right, Christian nationalism and everything, how they talk about, abortion, the issue of abortion, and how abortion is like, morally wrong and everything. God knew you in your stomach. Cool, right? But when you got verses in the Bible where God, again, let's go back here, go to the verses, where God is instructing them to kill the young, to kill the children and the infants, right? You can't have no abortion conversation about this. You see what I'm saying? Like, what conversation can you have about abortion when we have within the text that, yeah, God is kind of cool with killing infants and babies, depending on the context, right? In this context, here, these were babies and infants who were the children of wicked people, right? And again, wicked people, by this definition, these were individuals that were not living up to the standard of God and his ways, right? Like, these people weren't necessarily like when we think wicked in like a Western, in an American context, even if you're not religious, you think really, really bad, like Hitler or somebody, right? they weren't necessarily like that. They just weren't living the life that the Israelites were being asked to live by Yahweh. Thus, that made them wicked, and they were, serving other gods. And again, I'll give you the women. Hey, lady, you out there worshiping Baal or whatever, you got to go too. I'm granting you the women. I'm not even using the women and children argument. Take the women out of here. What the infants? An infant, by definition, has no recollection of what's going on. They don't know who's doing what. They don't know who Yahweh is. They don't know who Baal is. They don't know anything. They are infants. By definition, they don't know shit. Kill them too? And so I don't understand how Christians, the Christian right, and this is something that, really, if the left wanted to actually, use the word against these people, this is how you could do it. Yeah, God is fine with killing infants and children. So why would God necessarily be against abortion when he was okay with getting rid of infants and children of wicked people? By definition, if you are a Christian, non-believers having sex, or people who are not living up, because we know a whole bunch of Christians have sex. By definition, these individuals are outside of the law of the Old Testament. And so in the eyes of Yahweh, these individuals would be pagans for the most part. So you can make an argument if you are a Christian that, pagans aborting children is in lockstep with the word of God to a certain degree, right? But again, I'm reading these things and I'm like, yo, this is a lot for me to handle. I can't square these things in my soul and my psyche that this stuff is being advocated for. This stuff is being justified. Right. People are advocating for this. People are trying to justify these things. And I'm saying people like the Bible, right? Like the Bible is advocating, the Bible is justifying, the Bible is calling for, commanding. If you believe the word, this is from God. God is telling them, kill these infants, kill these women, kill these children, kill the animals. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, yo, this is like, again, you kind of hear these things preached in a certain way, whatever. But when you read it and the way that I was reading it, it really caused me to kind of look into myself like, oh man, like this is yeah. Right. So that was causing me to kind of have some questions about my faith. Right. And then the last thing that happened is I'm reading the New Testament. Right. I'm reading, the New Testament, and we get to like Paul and Paul's letters, right? So I'm reading Paul's letters, and a couple of things were actually clear to me as I'm reading Paul's letters. Thing number one, Paul was absolutely underneath the impression that Jesus was coming back in his lifetime, and I'm going to the text to show y'all this because. Hey man, where are we? Okay, here we go. We back here. Hold on. We back here. All right, here we go. Let's type it in. Let's find it. Give me the scriptures that show Paul believed Jesus was returning in his lifetime. All right, here we go. 1 Thessalonians, the 4th chapter, the 15th to the 17th verse. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven, and we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Right? Let's go to 1 Corinthians, 7th chapter, 29th to the 31st verse. What I mean, brothers and sisters, is that the time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as if they don't. Those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them. Wait, did I read that right? From now on, those who have wives should live as if they do not. Those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them. For this world in its present form is passing away. Romans, the 13th chapter, the 11th to the 12th verse. And do this, understanding the present time, the hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. Philippians, 4th chapter, the 5th verse. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, the 51st to the 52nd verse. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. Right? Now, yes, scholarly reflection. Many scholars believe Paul's earlier letters, like 1 Thessalonians and 1 Corinthians, show a stronger sense of imminent, eschatology. Later letters seem to moderate this urgency. Absolutely. Some suggest that as time passed and Jesus did not return, Paul may have refined or reinterpreted his expectation, not denying the return, but recognizing it might not occur as quickly as first thought, right? And so I read that, right? Again, I'm reading the Bible, and so I'm reading Paul, and I'm like, wait a minute, Paul thinks that this is happening like now, right? Now this I was not aware of at all, right? I never got to read the Paul letters growing up, right? Growing up, I read the Gospels over and over again. Like, I would sit in church when the pastor was preaching and like pull out the Bibles in the back of the pew and just read the Gospels, all because I just love reading, Jesus' words and the parables and everything. Even the ones that I couldn't understand at the time as a child, I love to read them, right? So I never read the Paul letters. Once I read the Paul letters, though, the Paul letters are where I'm like, okay, Paul thought this was happening now, right? Like, you have to read the actual letters. Like, read the whole book. I'm giving you these like verses and stuff, and I don't want you to think that I'm kind of just taking things out of context. Read the entire. There's an urgency to Paul where you're reading it and you're like, oh yeah, he thinks this is happening now. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, how could Paul be so like wrong, right? And because Paul was so wrong about the return of Jesus, it makes me look at Paul through a different light. Because remember, Paul never met Jesus. Paul didn't have no relationship with Jesus at all. Paul was a persecutor of Christians. And as the text says, he was walking. Well, he wasn't walking. He was on his horse, I think. And, he had a vision. A blinding light came down. And Jesus said, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Paul was blind for a couple of days. And then eventually he was Saul before. Then he becomes Paul. And now he's a believer. He's an apostle. And he's preaching the gospel, right? That's what the text says, right? But again, I'm reading this now. And I'm like, well, if Paul got this stuff so wrong, again, he got the return of Jesus so wrong. And I don't hear this addressed that often by ministers, pastors, deacons, spiritual leaders. If Paul got this stuff so wrong, how do you not look at his I'm trying to be respectful here. How do you not look at Paul's kind of vision with Jesus or whatever and question it though? Right? Because again, you would think Jesus would have told Paul, I'm not coming back right now. Right? Like, Paul spreading misinformation. He's writing, he's like, part of the reason why he's writing these letters is the churches that he's, founding and talking to, they're getting work. Like, they're watching their friends die. And they're like, hey man, I thought he was, I thought this was going to happen. Right? He believed it was happening then, right now. Like, it's happening tomorrow. That's why when Paul gives advice, and you have to read everything in context. When he's saying that, if you don't have a wife, it don't matter. If you're a slave, it don't matter. Like, who cares about slavery, whatever, right? Like, the slave and the free are the same in Christ. if you don't have a wife, who cares? Like, this is all gonna be over. He's giving this advice, and you have to read about Paul through this context, because otherwise you can have people living a life that they ain't really meant to live, right? Because if the world is ending tomorrow, then yeah, who cares about getting married and whatever and all that stuff? Like, none of this matters, really, right? But it didn't happen. So how could Paul get this stuff so wrong, but had a vision that was from Jesus, right? Again, these thoughts fall, or they feel like they fall underneath the category of blasphemous as you know, when you're a Christian, because again, like, there's not really like space for like conversation and doubt. At least I didn't feel like there was. So I'm reading this and I'm like, yo, how could you not look at Paul's conversation with Jesus or his experience with Jesus through a different light now that we know that he was so wrong about the return? It didn't happen. And again, it's 2025. It, like, Paul wasn't a little wrong. Paul was, Jesus died around like 30 to 33 AD. Paul might have started preaching this thing maybe like 5 years later. Paul is like, let's say by the year 40, Paul was giving these predictions, like, thought it was coming back, right? Paul is off by what? Like 1900 years, some change, right? Like, he wasn't off a look, he was off a lot of it. Didn't happen. And so now I'm like, okay, well, Paul, you know what? Okay. And so again, all of these things, I'm reading the Bible. These things are causing me to have much doubt, or a little bit of doubt. Again, I'm being honest, right? I'm being honest, right? I'm reading the Bible every day. I'm reading it on the bus. I'm reading it on the train. I'm reading it at work, right? I'm at the station. You know, I'm at a computer station. I just sit there all day long, and so I read the Bible. I'm learning. I'm reading, and I am captivated. I am so invested in this where I'm like, I gotta get to the next book. I gotta get to the next chapter, right? I'm reading as fast as I can, but with understanding, because there were times where I got confused and I had to like take a step back, reread. And so, but I'm like, okay, Paul thought this was happening for the most part, right? And so that was, and then the last thing was the man himself, Jesus Christ, right? Let's go back to where we were. Hold on. All right. Give me the verses where Jesus predicts the coming of the Messiah. And I phrase it that way in one purpose. Okay. No. Okay, wait. What detail? Okay. What events? No, there's a part of the New Testament. Sorry. Where Jesus tells disciples before this generation passes. And this is very important for you. All right. Matthew 24:34. It appears in other books, right? Truly I tell you, this generation will, you know, let's go to the actual word. Let's go to Matthew, the 24th chapter. I want y'all to see this. Matthew 24th chapter. All right. All right, here we go. I think the 34th verse. Okay, this is a lot. I didn't realize it was this much. This is what you want to read the full thing here, right? But when we, so he's given to the disciples, hey, you'll know when it's like the end times where when this happens, this happens, and be on the lookout for this, right? So then we get here where he tells the disciples again. He's talking to his disciples, and he says, "Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. I repeat, truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." What things? These things. Everything between this and this. These things described here. Okay? Well, obviously, they all died. The disciples all dead. Everyone in that time is dead. Okay? All their children are dead. And again, there's been reinterpretations or here's what he really meant and all that stuff. And I got you. Again, I'm not even saying that that's not true. I'm letting you know, when I read that, I'm like, and again, I read the Gospels growing up as a child. Either I was speeding past this part, or again, it just didn't register in my mind. But this generation means this generation. That's what it means. And so again, I have all of these questions. I have all of these concerns. There's nowhere to really go and have a conversation without people thinking that you're some type of, heretic or, doubting Thomas. And so you're just stuck with it, or you're left with these things. I speak with my brother about it all the time. My younger brother, who I talk to. Actually, me and him talked last night or Sunday. Actually, Sunday we talked, and we had this conversation. And I was telling him, yeah, not about this specifically, but about like the doubts and questions that I have, and I do have questions. I have questions. Again, I've looked into okay, the people who don't believe in the resurrection, I've looked into what the explanations are, and their explanations, quite frankly, it's like, okay, well, the disciples just had visions, and I'm like, all of them, even Paul, all of them just had, when they saw Jesus, they had visions, so they thought that they saw something. Okay, well then how was the tomb empty? Right? Oh, they just went to the wrong tomb. Well, surely when Christianity was spreading, Rome, if Rome wanted to put the stop to all of this Jesus talk, they would have just produced the body, right? And I have all of these questions because, again, those arguments to me, I'm like, right? And Paul, again, we have Paul's own words about the things that he went through, the persecution that he went through, right? Again, it's just so hard for me to make a decision on this, right? Because in my mind, I'm always like, well, I was born with this religion, I was raised in this religion, right? So, do I believe these things because I believe them to be true on the basis of the book itself, the story itself, or do I believe these things because I was raised in this tradition, right? Meaning, if I was raised in a Middle Eastern country, would I have found Jesus, or would I be saying, all honor due to Allah? And I'm obsessed with this question, and I'm trying to get down to the truth and get down to, okay, I need to search myself, search my soul to you know to you know to I'm trying to find the words. Um, Also, I hope my AC is not that loud. You know, when I watch this video back, I'll see it how loud my AC is. It gets hot in this room, but you know, in the future, if it's kind of drowning out the words or if it's annoying, I'll just suffer through it for the sake of the live stream. Um, uh, yeah, man, it's just I want to get to the truth, whatever the truth is. I'm not comfortable just believing something for the sake of believing something. You know, that's not me. That's not how I'm built. And so I have these questions, and I'm going on this journey, and this was a long way for me getting to, you know, yes, I left the church because I wanted to focus on my health. That is true. My physical health and my mental health. That is not a lie, and it wasn't an excuse. I would probably still be playing, if not for these things. But another factor that has been weighing on me in the recent weeks have been these questions, have been these doubts, have been these feelings about everything as it pertains to the Bible, religion, God, and like, what do I believe? What don't I believe? Like, you know, even like the entire, like, God, the master of the universe, the Alpha and the Omega, the supreme being, he makes everybody, then he regrets it, and so he kills them all in the flood, right? Even though, again, the flood story was also, you know, taken from, like, it's like 70% identical to another story of another culture and religion, but put that to the side, right? Right? And so then, you know, the earth repopulates itself. He chooses these group of people, the Israelites, to be his special group of people, right? For some reason, amongst the entire world of people. And then, you know, they go to get land, this and that, and then, you know, things happen. And then eventually he sends his son down to die for humanity's sins. And okay, well then why the chosen people for, though? Like, why not just send the savior to save everybody if that's the ultimate goal? Right? Like, I don't understand. Right? Similarly, in Revelation, you know, it talks about that Jesus eventually defeats the devil. Okay, but why not just defeat the devil? Better yet, why allow the devil to roam at all on earth? Like, for what purpose does it serve to have the devil roaming earth? I don't understand why. Right? And so again, I have these questions. I have these things that I'm struggling with, these things that I'm dealing with, and because I have these things, stepping away was good in order for me to kind of really, like, search myself, search my soul, read the text, find myself, and find what I believe. It's kind of hard to kind of get down to what you believe when you're in the religious environment versus when you can take a step back and be kind of, you know, with yourself. You know, you can kind of get to, hey, you know what? This is kind of what I believe. I've sat with it. I've thought about it. I've really meditated on it. I really, you know, this is what what I believe, right? And so I'm hoping that eventually I will have I'll make a decision. I'll make a declaration of, hey, I believe this, and to live with it. You know. All right. Woo! I'm saving my purpose for another live. I've been talking for an hour and 28 minutes. I have no idea how these people do this for hours and on hours, on hours, on hours, on hours. Like, I know some people that stream for like 5 6 hours. How do you do it? How do you talk for that long? I mean, it is fun to just talk like this and just go and go. I see 2 eyeballs, so two people are watching. Salute to the 2 people watching this right now. I thank you. You know, much appreciated. I will remember you when eventually we have 20 people watching. But yeah, so I'll say that for another time. I want to go into Jordan Peterson real quick. right? That's what I want to do. Let's go into Jordan Peterson. Hold on. Let me go to YouTube. All right, yeah, here we go. Let's go to Jordan because Jordan Peterson had a nice debate with some atheists, and I think things were exposed, and yeah. Where are we? Okay, here we go. It's your Jubilee video. All right. I hope that you can. I hope that you can see. You can hear the video. Am I sharing audio? Let me make sure. General camera. All right. We hoping that the audio is going through. All right. This was the first clip that I saw in this whole thing, by the way. When it hit, when the clip started to go around and hit, bro, I was about to sleep, but I saw your live stream. I just wanted to wish you a good life and stay safe and happy in life, and you achieve your goals in life. Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Yeah, he said I don't know you. Nah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. I'm hoping to get better day by day, but I appreciate the kind words, man. It's rare that you get kind words on YouTube and like these streams and whatnot. So thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. All right, here we go. Let's get into this. Now, let's start here. This title was not the original title. The title on the video originally was One Christian versus 20 Atheists, right? But because of that little, back and forth that you saw in the beginning where the dude, the dude basically says, are you a Christian, Jordan? And he's like, I haven't claimed that. They went and they retroactively changed the title to Jordan Peterson versus 20 Atheists, right? And we know this is the case because Jubilee, they've done no sounds from the video, brother. Watch out. Fuck. Okay, how do I? Oh, thank you for pointing this out. I'm trying to. Okay, how do I? All right, let me stop screen and let me start screen again. Okay, share screen. Share screen. Okay. Share. Let me know if you can hear now.
My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're...
I do need practice. I do need practice. Okay, now it works. Cool. All right, cool. All right, so here we go.
Don't know what they're rejecting.
Atheists reject God. My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Now, this is a weird way to start a conversation. If you're being clear, right? Because atheists, most atheists that I'm aware of are actually agnostic, meaning they just don't believe, or like, they're not claiming for sure that there's no God. They can claim that they don't believe that the Christian God is a real God, or the Jewish God is a real God, or Allah's not real, right? Or they just don't know, right? And so they'll say that there's no evidence of a God, right? So this is kind of an interesting thing that, you know, most atheists reject God, but they don't know what they're rejecting. All right, Jordan, he's getting into his, you know, psychological bag.
Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics, like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
This is how procrastination manifests in high performing man. This is me before putting things.
I could pay to not see these commercials. I just don't want to pay.
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So
And
there's
so-
always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out. But
Then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheists claim that there's no God is
Yeah.
a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but
Yeah.
my experience with atheists is twofold, is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak. And
Opera or Brave browser? I haven't heard of either one of those. Opera. I'm gonna write that down. Hold on. Let me write that down right now. Opera and Brave browser. All right. Use Opera or Brave browser for no ads. All right. I'm gonna try that for my next stream just because, you know, I'm about to wrap up anyway. I got 5 minutes to 9. I didn't realize it was this late. Let me get to the conversation. You know, this was this claim here. I want to get to the meat of this thing. As it pertains to Jordan, because this thing has already been kind of dissected a bunch of times. Let's get to my man. Where was he? I remember. All right, let's get here. All right, cool. All right, so this is what I remember this guy. And this kind of gets me to my point that I really want to make about Jordan Peterson. I have no desire to react to this entire debate. It's too long and I'm getting hot. I'm getting hot. This light in this room. All right, here we go.
Mr. Peterson.
How you doing?
Danny, nice to meet you.
what's your name?
Danny.
Danny.
You say atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I could flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay. Do Catholics attend to Mary?
Well, yes,
Okay. So do they fit that description of worship?
yes,
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
well, they might not put her in the highest
But you would
place.
put it that way.
No,
You just said it. Now you're taking it back.
there's
now?
still a hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within the
There's something at the top.
All right, you can worship things
Mary is
below.
quite a ways up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's go over your definition of worship again. What's your definition of worship?
Attend to,
Attend to. Do
prioritize.
Catholic
Now, again, for the record, I don't care about this debate at all, really. I care about what this dude gets Jordan Peterson to actually admit. That's what I'm, hoping to get to.
Sacrifice for.
what do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No, I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't
Well,
add that to my definition.
You understand.
I said there was a hierarchy as well.
You attend.
So you can attend to something trivially, or you can attend to it deeply.
And now you're adding stuff to the definition. But your original
I
definition.
added the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you
just
familiar?
didn't understand it.
Are you familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism.
I agree, by the way. Yes. Jordan is overrated, and it's yeah, man, this is a bad clip for Jordan. This was not a good clip for Jordan at all. And again, we're going to get into actually like what the real problem here.
Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
How do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
All right, boom, strike one. Strike one. He asked Jordan directly, hey, you're a Christian, aren't you? Which Jordan says, you say that. I have not said that. All right, let's continue here.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either
it,
you're a
'cause I
Christian
won't
or you're
talk to
not.
you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
This is strike two. Again, remember, the original title of this video was one Christian versus 20 atheists. Again, now, why did you believe? Did they not know that Jordan does not identify as a Christian? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? But again, homeboy is right in this clip so far.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
Now, again, the substance of what they were discussing, who cares? It's not important, right? The reason, and look, this went viral. The right wing in your country is crazy. It's going crazy, bro. The right wing in your country is going crazy, bro. I hear you, but see, Jordan Peterson is not like, he is on the right. Totally agree. He's on the right, right? But what happened here has a larger point that I want to kind of get to about Jordan Peterson and kind of what just happened here, right? What we just watched was Jordan finally kind of having his foot put to the fire to answer flat out whether or not he himself identifies as a Christian, right? Now, this is relevant because Jordan, he has historically made his he uses the biblical text as kind of like a framework for his like the psychological advice that he gives to like men in particular, but people overall, right? He constantly talks about certain, stories from the Bible. He brings up, Jesus. He'll talk about like Cain and Abel and what that represents, right? Right. And again, all of these stories actually do have kind of these larger meanings and takeaways from them other than just like strictly doctrine, right? So like you could be an atheist and read the Bible and come away with a ton of like, lessons from it, right? But the reason why this clip went viral is Jordan has been dancing like in between these two lines of atheist and Christian for quite some time now. And when like pressed on it, like he's been in debates with Alex O'Connor. He sat across from Richard Dawkins as well. Like he's always been able to kind of Sam Harris. He's been able to kind of like wiggle his way through ever having to actually take a stance on, hey, do you believe these things or do you just find these things to be useful? And they're not one and the same. One and the same. Whatever. They're not the same thing. You can find the Bible to be useful without believing in the literal claims of the doctrine or buying the theology, right? And so in this clip, Jordan is actually being asked, "Hey, are you a Christian?" It's flat out. I don't know if he wasn't prepared to actually answer that, but when he's like, I don't have to tell you, or I haven't claimed to be. Dude, you are debating 20 atheists. They all believe you're a Christian, right? And they would believe that, and Jubilee would invite you under the premise of a Christian because they have watched your lectures and they've heard you debate, and you come across as somebody who is now. To me, I never believed Jordan was like a believing Christian. I always kind of viewed it as kind of like him using the text again to have these larger conversations. But not necessarily believing the actual claims that or the literal truths that are described in the Bible. But the fact that we got this on record now, he should not be able to kind of go back to dancing between these two lines ever again. But at the same time, I want to give grace to Jordan because, as I have admitted earlier in this video about my own doubts about, my religious faiths or certain parts of my faith, I believe that, when I read the Bible for the first time this year, front to back, excluding those chunk of chapters at the end of the Old Testament, which I am still getting to by the end of this year, my appreciation of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is kind of like Jordan's in a way, where I don't know if I believe, that these things literally happen. But the deeper meaning and the takeaways from the stories, I find personally to actually be profound. Like, being 100% honest, right? Like the story, again, I said David on the run from King, is it King Saul? I think it was King Saul. Through the early parts of his year, like living in the wilderness, having to lie to people about who he is and running into the temple. David, as the king, falling, to his lust when he slept with Bathsheba, who was married to somebody else. David, the horrible father, who because of his weakness as a father, his daughter got sexually assaulted. His son died in pursuit of justice for his sister. Right? Like you have these deep, Joseph, right? Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers because his father had favoritism towards him, right? Like you have these deep messages within the Bible that are really, really awesome, right? And you don't have to believe that they are literally true to find these things to be meaning and valuable. But Jordan should just say that, right? He should just say that. He got closer to Muslims in the UK and gaining huge fans from us. And later on, he went with the right wing in the US. I feel like he was using the Bible just to make thug life moments and make fame. I don't know about Jordan's time in the UK getting close to Muslims. Like when you say getting close to Muslims, was he like using the Quran in the UK similarly to how he used the Bible in the US? Or and again, I'm not saying that you're lying. I have not personally come across that part of Jordan's professional career. Most of what I know from Jordan Peterson is he has been using the Bible faithfully as kind of the foundation for, at least in his most recent years, his moral framework and what he believes is the prescription to many of the ills in modern society, especially in America. He visited, hold on. He visited mosque, watch his meetings with Muhammad Hijab. I will. I'm going to write this down. Hold on. I'm going to write this down. Okay. Investigates Jordan and Muhammad Hijab. I will look into that. But Jordan should just come out and say that he finds these religious texts to offer wisdom from the past without having to literally believe these things. I don't understand why when he's asked about does he believe in God, he'll say things like, "What do you mean about believe? What do you mean by God?" Right? Like, what we're asking. Do you believe that there is a supernatural entity that is master of the universe, who sees all, knows all, who is omnipresent? What we're asking. Just say I don't know, or I don't believe that, or that you think it's irrelevant because really the stories are what matters. I don't understand why Jordan won't just say these things. And that is what frustrates many people, myself included, about Jordan Peterson. Right? It just does. And that's why when that particular clip went viral, people had a field day with Jordan because it was like about damn time somebody finally, got an answer out of Jordan about his belief. All right. In your opinion, why is he keeping himself in the gray area always? This is tough. So I have a couple of theories on this regarding Jordan Peterson, right? I think one possible explanation as to why is Jordan has gained a lot of support amongst the religious right in America, and he doesn't want to lose that support amongst them. Like, it's audience capture is a real thing. I don't know if you ever heard the phrase audience capture. It's basically where you kind of, you build like a public profile, public persona, whatever, and you gain fans or people who enjoy listening to you and your point of view and your perspective. And so you actually begin to tailor your content, or you are very, very you're very, very self-aware. So you might not say certain things that could piss them off because you don't want to lose their support. And so that's one possible explanation. Another one is financial, right? That if Jordan loses these people, some people are worried about losing their audience just because that's their tribe. Some people are worried about losing their audience because that's their financial basis, right? I don't know how Jordan makes his money. I know he's signed to like the Daily Wire right now. You see my point? He gains fans by them here, and he has to stick with it. I totally understand what you're saying. I totally get it. So it could be financial. Some people don't want to lose their audience just because that's their tribe, and they don't want to be like socially or politically isolated. Other people are driven strictly by finances. I know Jordan is working underneath like the Daily Wire umbrella right now. I don't know his financial situation. Does he sell books? Does he still like do pay speeches? I don't know. I don't know, right? The third explanation, and this one would be charitable to Jordan, given that he's a very smart and bright man, and I don't know why he would not find another way to express this, but it's possible that he just doesn't know what he believes. Like kind of like the way that I was earlier in this stream, where I was talking about how I was raised in a Baptist church, Christian family, and so this is my foundation, and I'm not having questions about these things. It's possible Jordan just doesn't know what he really believes at this point, right? Like, now, again, I think the best way to navigate that is to be honest and say, hey, when you're asked about these things, say, you know what, I don't know, or some days I believe, and other days I'm like, this can't be true, right? Like, he should just be vulnerable and honest about the fact that he goes back and forth about these things. So that's the third case, which is he just doesn't know. He doesn't know. He sells books and makes tours in Europe, and I guess he's going to support out of his support to Israel. Well, that's the thing too. Yeah, like him, Ben Shapiro, and I think Benjamin Netanyahu. They had like a table talk or something on the Daily Wire. Yeah, again, Jordan. And again, I used to look up to Jordan Peterson, and in a way, I still like a lot of his content. He did a video on the Lion King, not a video. It was like a class he was having on the Lion King, and kind of like how he does like the psychoanalysis and what it's really trying to say and everything. I thought it was really good, actually. And I still think Jordan Peterson's advice to young boys and men about taking responsibility and, control the things you have control over, like, fix your bed and everything, control what you can actually control before you tackle the world. All great advice. But I do think that Jordan, I even like his biblical analysis, but And by the end of the day, and simply he's yes, yeah. So he makes money. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, Jordan, he's lost a lot of people once he stepped into the religious ring, but didn't want to kind of give people his honest religious feelings and what he actually believed, and that's where he messed up, right? And this is where I end this stream. Again, thank the 3 people for watching. I'm gonna thank you, my brother. I don't want to mispronounce your name, so but you know who you are for the conversation through the chat. It's definitely made the show a lot more interesting having somebody actually talk to me. This is my first actual real live stream doing it long like this. Like this is 2 hours. I've never done anything like this long ever. This is fun to me. I see why people do it now, right? Even with nobody watching or very few people watching. I do enjoy this content. My role in life with people like him, you can find his knowledge without any toxic ideas. I agree. But yeah, I again, thank you all for watching. For those of you that are watching, I hope you enjoyed tonight. I don't know when the next time I will be streaming will be. We shall see. I'm trying to keep a schedule. Let's see how the week unfolds, right? Have a good night, everybody, and sweet dreams, all that good stuff. And you stay safe too, my brother. All right.